You know, it's times like this where I think to myself, in your face, Nadia Hart Retro, I was right about G5 all along.
Fuck you, I was right, fuck you, I was right, fuck you, I was right!
When I originally did my review of A New Generation, which I do still have plans for revisiting, one of my main criticisms of the movie was the lack of an explanation for what happened during the time skip. Something to rationalize why Ponykind went back to hating each other and how everything Twilight and her friends worked for went to waste. A lot of people responded to this with wait for the TV show or tie-in comics since they would provide answers to those questions, and how it was unfair of me to criticize the movie for asking questions that would eventually be given answers. The thing about that is, it's not a good excuse because it's being used to hand-wave away the fact that the entire story was completely retconned back to the status quo. When you're doing the whole all of these questions will be answered in the next episode thing, you have to give people a satisfying conclusion to the current story. Something that sparks their interest instead of teasing them with a repetitive cliffhanger. The mystery that you leave for the audience to think about has to be a good one. Something that's fun to think about instead of making it into a chore. The mystery given by A New Generation was not good because there were so many confusing and contradicting pieces of information laced throughout the entire movie that outright broke the world. For example, it was made very clear throughout G4 that ponies needed magic to keep the sun in a natural orbit. And now in G5, where all the magic has disappeared, the ponies have nothing to move the sun, which would result in the planet being incinerated, because it doesn't rotate, I guess. Even if we were to assume they just came up with some magic spell that allowed the sun to move by itself, they would still need magic for it to work. It can't be because of any scientific breakthroughs, because the technology seen throughout the film is not in any way futuristic or at least something that would suggest that they invented some kind of super science capable of moving a celestial body. And this is just the first example that comes to mind. There's a lot of other similar problems raised by the movie's inability to address its inconsistencies with G4. A couple of months later though, IDW released the first of a series of G5 sequel comics, consisting of events taking place sometime after the movie. And these were the comics that were going to provide all the answers to those questions people had from seeing the movie, including what caused ponies to divide. And after reading them, there's honestly a part of me that just wishes they kept the information anonymous. You ever heard the phrase, a horrible explanation is worse than no explanation at all? That is the only way I can describe issues 1 through 10 of the MLP G5 comics without going into crucial detail. I probably should have taken the big reveal that they were using Discord as the main source of conflict again as a clear sign for how god-awful the writing would be, because it's not like these morons were creatively bankrupt already. Let's just have Discord make an oopsie for the 20th time. Because if it worked the first time, we have to keep repeating it. That was the strategy they used for the highly successful Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy, right? I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt at first, but after issue 2, it just gets more and more convoluted until it all leads up to the stupidest way they could have possibly ended this story. It all starts with the Unity Crystal being disrupted by someone stealing one of the pieces. Okay, first off, why wasn't anyone safeguarding this thing? If the Unity Crystal is so important, why isn't it being protected? Is no one keeping watch over this artifact that they need to keep their magic intact? Or at least place it in a secure safe with a lock instead of just leaving out in the open for anybody to steal?
Your intellect is as weak as your dollar. Failure is your destiny. You disrespect yourself and your nation. You are made of stupid.
Anyway, they go in search of the thief until they stumble upon the lost city of Canterlot. They come across Discord, who's revealed to be the thief, and now it's a race against time to stop Discord from destroying the Unity Crystal to save magic in Equestria. So first of all, let's delve into the answers they provide for the questions I had from watching the movie. So apparently, the reason ponies went back to hating each other was because some stupid unicorn was acting rude to people. Somehow, don't ask me how because the comics don't explain it either, this leads to more cases of the 3 pony tribes acting racist to each other, which leads to a bunch of chaotic stuff going on. And Twilight's solution to this problem was to concentrate all of the world's magic into 3 crystals and safeguard it to prevent magic from disappearing or being used for evil. There are so many things to unpack here. So many problems raised from just this small handful of panels. Being told that I have to accept this as the answer for all the questions I had after watching the movie makes me disappointed and upset with IDW in a way that I cannot even describe. Like, again? We're doing the whole pony kinda tricked into hating each other plot again? How many times do they fall for that nonsense? We just got done having a story about the ponies learning to work together and stop hating each other, and they were this easily tricked into relapsing into their previous racism. Why? Because some random unicorn started acting entitled? How did the rest of Equestria pick up on that? How did everyone in the country hear about this one isolated incident and respond with, we should go back to being racist? Hell, even with context, it doesn't even sound like a race issue. It's just some random pony cutting in line. The ponies of Equestria have to be the most easily persuaded characters in all of fiction. They're practically tricked into being racist again at the drop of a hat. Like, did they all just forget about the Student 6? Did they just forget about how everyone banded together and put aside their differences to defeat the terrible trio who was threatening to bring back the Wendigos and destroy civilization? Was the School of Friendship really that pointless of an inclusion that they were going to erase and undo everything they did with it that quickly? And what about the Student 6? Them bringing everyone together in the finale was the only arguable thing of value they did in the entire show, and now it's worthless. You're telling me that the School of Friendship was able to easily solve the stupid race issue, and then it immediately ends up being useless when the same shit is repeated later on. It's not even an original conflict. Like, Jesus Christ, how many times have they done the racism bad plot already? They couldn't even come up with a more original reason. The ponies were all living in harmony, until they weren't. That is so painfully lazy. Little kids could have come up with something more unique than these adults being paid money to come up with ideas. Why would the ponies even allow this to happen? Aren't they aware that racism would cause their civilization to collapse? It's not like in real life where you can argue that racism is a reoccurring issue, because in the real world, people acting racist isn't going to cause the collapse of civilization. In Equestria, there are provable, tangible consequences to racism that are disastrous for the entire world. So how do they keep falling for that? Do they just forget about the Wendigos every single time? You can't even make the argument that some ponies thought it was a folktale and didn't take it seriously. The Wendigos were shown to be very real. The ponies of Equestria actually saw them and pointed them out. Do they seriously not care that the Wendigos were going to come back and freeze everyone? And again, the whole thing is perpetrated by a single pony. Why did the ponies go back to being racist because of this one unicorn? That would be like if I started going around and calling every black person the N-word, and instead of just getting eventually beaten up for being a dick, it convinced everyone in America to start a race war. You know what? Fuck it, the ponies of Equestria deserve to die. They deserve to be frozen to death if they're that stupid to let themselves be manipulated by an obviously evil cartoon villain. And that in itself would be bad enough. But you know what makes it even worse? This is an event that takes place while Twilight and her friends are still around. This wasn't something that happened as a result of Twilight and friends not being alive to keep the peace. It happened while they were still alive. And they don't even look aged up from the events of the last problem. They look exactly the same as they did in that episode. How in all things that are holy did Twilight and the main six fail to stop the racism from spreading? They were the ones who hit home the message about the importance of ponies living together in peace. They gave the big speech that defeated the terrible trio when everyone was there to listen to it. Why wouldn't they do anything to stop it? And if they did try to do something, why wouldn't anyone listen to them? Do you not know who these guys are? Did you just forget that these are the ponies who have saved Equestria from countless threats? Hell, in the movie the capital was invaded and taken hostage until Twilight and her friends defeated the Storm King. Did they just forget about that? Did they miss the news somehow? How do you miss a news story as big as the capital of your country being under attack by foreign invaders? You know, it's bad enough that the ponies of Equestria fell for the racism trap again. But now you want me to believe that Twilight and the rest of the main six failed to do anything to stop it. So to all those people out there who keep using the passage of time excuse to explain why all the ponies went back to hating each other, there was no passage of time. This happened immediately after the events of the original finale, and there's no indication that there was some kind of long stretch of time before this happened. Otherwise, Little Cheese wouldn't still be a kid in this flashback. Why was Twilight powerless to stop the racism from spreading? How did it escalate so quickly under her rule? This makes her an even worse ruler than Celestia because, at least to her credit, civilization didn't collapse on her watch. This only happened over the course of like 15 years versus Celestia ruling Equestria for over 1,000. Honestly, at this point I'm left questioning why Celestia even wanted to retire. Equestria was honestly doing okay with the exception of some minor stupid stuff in 2 or 3 instances. Why would she risk breaking that streak by giving responsibility over the country to Twilight? Yeah, Twilight and her friends defeated several villains, but that doesn't equate to ruling over a country. That would be like making Iron Man the president of the United States after the Avengers saved New York. Oh, but it gets even better. Remember that Unity Crystal MacGuffin from the movie? The thing that was made the key to returning magic in Equestria? That was caused by Twilight too. Apparently, her grand master plan to save Equestria was taking everyone's magic and just stuffing it into these crystals. So she pretty much just made herself into a tyrant holding all of Equestria hostage by threatening to take away everyone's magic if they didn't stop arguing. That is the stupidest thing she could have possibly done in that situation. She's the princess of friendship. Couldn't she just, I don't know, find a way to encourage or teach people to get along? Oh no, there's a big threat that we can't face unless we're all unified. I better take away all the magic to keep us from fighting each other. And yet they end up fighting each other anyway.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
Did she really think that this was going to end the racism problem? Just taking all the magic and placing it in these crystals? If anything, that would just make the citizens even more angry and upset. And Alicorn is taking away all of their powers and telling them that they have to stop arguing if they want to keep it. What it does is send a horrifying implication regarding the citizens of Equestria. They never learned to stop being racist considering how many times they relapsed into that behavior. They just had a gun pointed at their heads with Twilight threatening to pull the trigger. Don't be racist, or A, ice spirits will freeze you to death, or B, I'm just gonna take away all your magic. Why did Twilight even think this was a viable solution? Did she literally forget that Equestria needs magic in order to function? The Pegasi needed to control the weather, the Earth ponies needed to farm, the Alicorns needed to move the sun and moon. What about the ponies living up in Cloudsdale? Did they all fall to their deaths after losing the ability to walk on clouds? They don't even take the time to explain how all of these things are still being done without the presence of magic. Also, you just gotta love this bullshit power creep. Apparently, despite not having enough power to move the sun and moon by herself, Twilight is powerful enough to control all of the magic in the world to the point of splitting it between these 3 crystals. Does this extend past Equestria? Did she ask before stealing the griffins and zebras and dragons' magic too? Or did she actually become a tyrant and conquer the world off screen? Oh, and that's another problem. In spite of the fact that they're constantly making references to the other races, like there's a panel where Sunny acknowledges the existence of the changelings, they still don't explain what happened to them. The yaks, the dragons, the diamond dogs, the obsidian cats, the zebras, the griffins, the hippogriffs, the Kirin, the changelings. What the hell happened to everyone? Don't you think at some point Sunny would be asking Discord these crucial questions? Last I checked, all of these different races helped make up a portion of Equestria's population because they were all seen together in Canterlot. Where did they go? Did they start living in isolation too? How are they operating without magic? I'd really hate to ask if they ended up dying off because that would be absolutely horrifying and make Twilight look like a monster. How did Celestia and Luna react to all this? If this is happening only a few days after the last problem, I'd imagine they'd still be around. Did they just agree to Twilight's stupid plan? Did they think it was a good idea to take all the magic and condense it into these crystals? This is literally what Starlight did in Season 5. Was Season 5 Starlight just supposed to be right all along? This just makes Twilight look like the villain in that situation for going against an ideology that she would just eventually defect to. There are already consequences for the tribes conflicting with each other, devastating ones. How does funneling all the magic in these crystals solve anything? So they can be stolen as a plot device further down the line? Nothing about this makes any sense whatsoever, and it just further proves a point that I was making in my review of the movie. G5 is trying way too hard with its reliance on G4 to tell its story. Wasn't sending it in the future supposed to make sure that the G4 characters wouldn't be around to influence the story? And what do? Immediately bring back Discord and make Twilight's stupid plan to convert magic into these crystals a plot point. It's nothing but a lazy attempt to ride on Friendship is Magic's previous popularity. This just makes the fact that they abandoned making G5 a reboot with a separate continuity even worse, because the writers don't want to come up with something more unique or different. They just want to pander to bronies and exploit them. Yeah, Friendship is Magic was a great show and seeing it end sucks. But giving the show a proper end was for everyone's benefit because dragging out the story like this is just going to make people sick of it. Everything Twilight worked for is now null and void because we have to make the previous generation a springboard for this new one. Let's make everything we accomplished in G4 not matter anymore so we can make it all about these new characters. But let's just use G4 as a framework for this story anyway because we're incapable of letting G5 stand on its own. This is the worst thing you can possibly do with a time skip in the sequel, and these idiots are practically relishing in it. Like they're actually proud of destroying everything for the sake of this disingenuous narrative. And the cringe only continues from that point forward. Firstly, all of the characters, at least the main 5, are boring cardboard cutouts. All of their personalities are one-note and generic with nothing particularly interesting that sticks out. Izzy is just silly and naive, Sunny is simple-minded and tends to have panic attacks, Hitch is kinda just there with no particular quirks, and Zip is kind of just this wannabe detective. There are scenes throughout the story that give them observation skills to show how smart they are, but being smart isn't a significant personality trait. Pip in particular is the worst of the bunch because of her constant whining and acting entitled the entire time. She has no positive qualities to speak of. All she does is obsess over her social media and live streaming. It's like they took Rarity and removed all of her positive traits, only leaving her vainness and self-centeredness. In a way, all of the main 5 feel like discount versions of the main 6, which I know is a criticism I use for the movie, but it just feels so much less satisfying here. They could have at least added more personality traits, especially with such a drastic change to the world with the return of magic. Seeing how they added almost nothing new to the main cast just makes the story boring. And then you have Discord. Oh, Ilk Pal, how I pity you as you witness how they massacred your boy. So this time around, Discord wants to destroy the magic because he thinks magic is the cause of racism and division amongst the ponies. So he thinks if he destroys magic, he'll bring peace to Equestria and fulfill Fluttershy's wish of creating harmony.
No, just no.
Let's start by going over the obvious holes in this plan. So Discord is just going to destroy magic which Equestria is currently using for their society to operate. It was shown to have become a central part of their community. Yes, you can make the argument they were able to survive without magic for hundreds of years, but they're using magic now. Magic they use to help in things like construction and transportation. What do you think's gonna happen if all of that is taken away? What if a Pegasus is flying while Discord is in the process of destroying the crystal? That Pegasus is gonna fall to their death. Actually, that's shown to directly happen in the first issue. There are so many unfortunate implications behind Discord wanting to abruptly destroy magic while the ponies are doing daily activities. Oh, you think you're going to bring peace and harmony to Equestria? I hope that construction worker who almost got crushed to death when you took away her magic doesn't disagree with you. He says he wants peace, yet he's creating a situation where hundreds of ponies could end up dying while they're just minding their own business. And no one gets killed or everyone turns out fine in the end is not an excuse. Discord is being reckless and careless and is not considering the long-term consequences of his plan. He's being a complete moron when he's supposed to be a lot smarter than this. And in spite of that, we're supposed to feel bad for Discord because he's lonely and misses Fluttershy. And yet he is actively disregarding her wishes by destroying the magic she swore to protect. What a way to honor the legacy of your best friend. Heck, even before she passes away, he was shown dismissing Fluttershy's feelings. In issue 6, there's a flashback where Fluttershy and Discord are shown arguing over magic and how it's causing division between ponies. And instead of listening to what Fluttershy has to say, he just storms off in a huff. And this scene with Discord claiming magic can destroy them is said with a lot of vitriol. Considering the timing and tone of this flashback, it looks like he wanted to destroy magic way before Twilight created the Unity Crystal. So wait a minute, did Fluttershy not do anything to tell Twilight and the others about Discord's growing contempt for magic? Did they just never take the time to talk to him and just hope the problem would go away? Did they just completely forget about Discord's history of impulsive and reckless behavior? Did they seriously think he wasn't gonna do anything? Why wouldn't they talk to him or at least keep him in check? At this point, I can't even say I entirely blame Discord because the main six were willing to ignore a giant problem that was standing right in front of them. And the bullshit continues when they suddenly decide that there's some sort of deep personal connection between Discord and Izzy when they hardly interact throughout the story. Why are we supposed to believe there's some kind of connection between Discord and Izzy? Because she did something that reminded him of Fluttershy? They hardly have any exchanges throughout the arc and all he sees of her is being left behind when the group split up to look for him, and how that somehow resembled Fluttershy making excuses for others. What makes it even worse is that in spite of the writers constantly attempting to make you feel bad for him, he's constantly doing terrible things throughout the story. He tricks someone into vaporizing an entire town by destroying one of his mirrors. He tries gaslighting Sunny into thinking magic is a bad thing without regard for the damage he'd be causing by destroying it. He traps the main five in a cage suspended over a deadly fall. I'm pretty sure that trapping people against their will while you attempt to permanently hobble the entire world to keep your friend's actions in place is a bad thing. There's no grayness in that. Why should I sympathize with him when he's being way worse than back when he was a straight-up villain? The worst thing Discord did during Celestia's rule, from what I can remember, was inconvenience the laws of reality. He wasn't trying to destroy society's source of energy or set criminals free to terrorize the capital. It's also that the writers have backstory fodder in the form of a G4 character for explaining stuff from the movie, so they don't have to commit to anything different. Oh, but you wanna know what the best part is? I don't think you have to guess because you've already figured it out. He gets off scot-fucking-free again. He doesn't receive any long-term punishment for all the trouble he caused, he just gets a slap on the wrist. How many times are they gonna let this guy get away with his actions? How many times are they going to make him into a karma Houdini? Fuck you, Discord. I don't care how sorry you feel about your actions. You don't deserve my sympathy. Admitting you did something wrong and saying I'm sorry doesn't make you a good person. Being a good person means taking responsibility for your actions instead of accepting a slap on the wrist when your friends in high places bail you out for PR. At this point, he's a wealthy, rich white guy constantly bailing himself out of jail for his crimes. So once again, we have a story where Discord threatens the well-being of absolutely everyone because he can't get over himself. And what? Was this moment with the message supposed to redeem him again or make us feel sorry for him? It really feels like he never grew to truly respect what Fluttershy's kindness and consideration stood for. All he cared about what was in it for him when she coddled his shitty ass despite his severe caliber of reckless behavior. Nobody else matters unless he gets to feel sorry for himself and act like he's doing the right thing. He should have run out of second chances long ago. If this was like the first or second time Discord went off the rails, I might have been able to sympathize with him. But this is just the latest in a long string of incidents of him doing stupid things and jeopardizing everyone's safety for the sake of his ego. He's not sympathetic, he's not relatable, he's just a brainless moron who constantly goes back on his character development. I have no idea why the writers both for the show and the comics insist on doing this to Discord, treating him like a plot device instead of a fleshed out character. At this point I can't even say I'm that angry about it. I'm just bored with it. It's cheap, lazy, and ridiculous how many times they've just had him relapse as a driving force for the conflict. But I know what you might be thinking. So what if Discord was badly handled, or if the answers to the questions from the movie weren't good? You have to acknowledge other elements of the story, don't you? Well, actually I do. And all of them are bad. I've talked before about the blandness of the main characters and how Pip in particular is just obnoxious, but there's a lot of other problems with these comics besides. The first one being the horrendously awful pacing. A lot of panels just amount to dragged out dialogue with not a whole lot of interesting chemistry between the characters. There's a lot of boring exposition dumping and filler where they aim for the barest attempt at humor. I wouldn't mind too much except that it's a problem that follows the reader throughout the entire arc. So much time is wasted on boring dialogue and unfunny jokes when they could be fleshing out the characters or try to make better sense out of Discord's motivations. And not to mention, there's a bunch of filler issues that don't do anything to further the story. You heard right, filler issues. Entire comics that serve no purpose except to waste the reader's time. There's like 1 or 2 panels in each one where they briefly reference Discord, and that's precisely it. Oh, but G4 was meant to be a slice of life show. Why are you criticizing G5 for trying to do the same thing? Well, that's because G4's stories were framed in a way that they didn't have to be dealt with in a timely manner. There was never a ticking clock counting down to the apocalypse by the end of the seasonal arc episode, so there was no immediate urgency in the show. Here, they immediately opened the comics with a dire situation involving magic glitching out. Several ponies came close to dying on screen. And in the following issue, they come across Discord, who announces his plan to destroy magic by destroying one of the crystals. And in the issue after that, well, let's just cut to Zip babysitting her dog. The filler issues are constantly interrupting the principal plot, leading to derailment throughout the story and no sense of focus. Oh no, Discord just announced he's gonna destroy magic and possibly send Equestria into a state of chaos. So let's jump to a bunch of inconsequential slice-of-life stories. What is this, Steven Universe? Cutting away from the central conflict when you drop a bombshell is because the potential end of civilization kills tension. That's like playing a video game where the bad guy is about to send a meteor crashing into your hometown and instead you go off to do a bunch of side quests and item farming. As a result of all this low-stakes filler combined with all these panels filled with dragged-out exposition dumping and half-baked jokes, the main story involving the search for Discord is both painfully slow and rushed beyond belief. There's never a moment where the reader feels juvenated because the flow is always being jumbled and scattered around. What it feels like is IDW trying to keep your attention with all of these cliffhangers while simultaneously wasting your time because they couldn't think of a competent way to keep the story going. It's just dull and monotonous, which is what the opposite of the story should be. Even some of the issues relating to the main story amount to nothing. There's this one issue where they learn about the legend of some magic mirror that Discord used to prank people while he was encased in stone. And throughout the entire issue, the main 5 never receive any information that's used to help track down Discord. And somewhere in the middle, there's this really dumb story about some guy who was making money from selling the obviously cursed mirror to multiple people who returned it. Like the concept of a refund doesn't exist in this world. How do you even trick people into being subjected to an obviously cursed mirror for money? Are the ponies of Equestria really that stupid? There's another issue where they find Fluttershy's message to Discord, which they use to defeat him later, but nothing of significance occurs during the issue. It just amounts to a flashback that explains next to nothing we don't already know. The flashback with Fluttershy arguing with Discord isn't even part of the pre-recorded message. So the only thing the main 5 have gained from this is a message from Fluttershy telling Discord to cope. Why not use the flashback to flesh out Fluttershy and Discord's characters? Give them more interaction and make it more emotional, or just make Discord have a crisis with himself. He could contemplate or reconsider whether or not destroying the magic would help everyone to make it easier to sympathize with him. Instead, it just makes him more unlikable by having him disregard Fluttershy's feelings. But by far the stupidest thing about this issue is how the key to Discord's plan and the clue the main 5 used to find him is because of a collection of Daring Do books left on Fluttershy's shelf. That makes no sense. How are the Daring Do books, let alone a small collection in Fluttershy's cottage, able to be perfectly reserved after all these years in the future? It's not like this was a personal treasure the main 6 saved. They literally have modern copies of the books. Their civilization collapsed. All of the previous towns and cities had been reduced to ancient ruins. They were forced to adapt to life without magic for who knows how long. And even in the movie, the ponies of Equestria were shown to have forgotten about their own history. How would Sunny or anyone else still know anything about Daring Do? And how do they know Daring Do was based on a real-life pony? They use one of the books she left behind as a direct map to Discord's hideout. There shouldn't be any recorded knowledge of Daring Do if their civilization collapsed on top of the ponies forgetting their own history. Was this just some research data that got passed down to Sunny by her dad somehow? How does he know about Daring Do? Holy crap, I'm losing my mind at this point. Nothing has made sense since the first page of the first issue. There is no consistent or any feasible logic to this story at all. I would have expected this from something like a preschool show on PBS or Sprout. This is unbelievably embarrassing. Even before Discord appears, there were signs that this story was bullshit. Like in the first issue, they start by having the dog track the thief's scents, which leads them to a forest. And in this forest, they conveniently come across the long-lost passageway into Canterlot. Okay, hold the goddamn phone. You're telling me that Maritime Bay was that close to Canterlot? They were only walking for 3 hours before Izzy found the gate. And what the hell is this secret passage to Canterlot even doing in the middle of a forest? Canterlot is supposed to be located on the face of a giant mountain overlooking the surrounding valley. There's never a panel where the main five are shown traveling upward or in some kind of incline, so how did they get up there? I'd like to see the passage of time argument being used to excuse this one. The passage of time would not cause the landscape to change in such a ridiculous way. Even without that information, it makes no sense that they were able to just walk here in as little as a few hours. Maritime Bay is established to be along the coastline, so even though we don't have an exact location, we know for a fact that it's next to the ocean. Now, look at this map of Equestria, where Canterlot is clearly shown to be near the center of the map. In order for the main five to just walk there, depending on which coast Maritime Bay is located near, they would still have to travel across all these old towns and cities. You seriously want me to believe that they covered that much ground in as little as 3 hours? No, not fucking possible. And then there's this stupid gate that Twilight put up to only allow certain people inside. That doesn't make sense either. What kind of dictator is Twilight supposed to be if she spread friendship to other countries who supposedly don't have it, openly invite them to Equestria, and subsequently build a literal gate to the capital for those who believe? That immediately implies that there are masses of people who have been deemed unworthy on account of not being friendly enough. How is this in any way a sensible judgment on keeping someone out of the city? How is one even deemed worthy in practice? Do you have to go on a friendship mission? Do you have to take a special test at the School of Friendship? It doesn't even work as security. How is a gate a practical barrier in a world where flight and teleportation exist? What really gets me about this is how Sunny has a flashback about her dad talking about how no one in Canterlot will feel lesser. No shit they won't feel lesser, because they've already been handpicked by the princess and given the express privilege of living there. I'm pretty sure there were plenty of people who felt lesser because they were arbitrarily gatekept by the friendship regime. She really is a worse ruler than Celestia. And finally, there's that ending. That stupid ending. So they record Fluttershy's message and show it to Discord, who says he's already seen it, meaning that it didn't change his mind the first time he saw it. So basically, this just shows that Discord really didn't care about how Fluttershy felt. He saw this message with a straight face and it still didn't change his mind. Some best friend you are. He claims that it was a long time ago and she didn't see the worst of it back then, but then Izzy just tells him that she would have been saying the same thing if she was still alive. And then for no real reason, he just gives them the crystal and gives up on his plan. So all it takes for Discord to change his mind about destroying magic is by giving him the exact same message from Fluttershy that didn't work the first time, but with a slightly different context to it. Seriously, what did they do different? It sounds like the exact same thing Fluttershy told Discord before. In fact, it actually sounds less detailed. If Discord was willing to change his mind that quickly after being shown the message a second time, then the problem was never with the ponies acting racist and being divisive over their differences. It was with Discord himself. He was just being a selfish dolt who wanted to do what he wanted regardless of what others were telling him. Even the message itself doesn't make any sense because it's saying the opposite of what Fluttershy and the others ultimately acted on. Fluttershy is trying to explain why it's important for ponies to have their magic and embrace their differences. But then why did they think that making those crystals and holding everyone's magic hostage was a good idea to keep everyone together? It just made everything worse and they do nothing to justify this decision. Did they try any other solution to the problem before deciding on the Unity Crystal? Did they really think holding everyone at gunpoint was a go-to answer for the racism problem? How can they just jump to a conclusion as stupid as saying stop arguing or we'll take away the means of your society to operate? Remember, Scootaloo was considered handicapped because of her inability to fly. So that means because of the main six decision to take away magic, entire generations of Pegasi were handicapped because they lived and died before they ever got a chance to experience what flying was like. That's the equivalent of breaking the kneecaps of a third of the human population. Did they actually even do anything about that one unicorn who was being a dick? Did they confront her? Did they try to reason with her or anything? Or is this just another thing they're leaving unresolved for another time? Just fuck these comics, I can't make sense out of them anymore. All this comic arc did was prove my point about G5 when I originally reviewed A New Generation. They should have just created an entirely new world with a separate continuity. Having it take place in the same universe as G4 is such a huge can of worms which the writers have popped open without the slightest concern. Considering the amount of changes G5 went through from being a full-on reboot to the sequel series we have now, I seriously wonder when the decision to make it a sequel to G4 was made because everything screams that it was a last-minute decision. It literally hangs on G4's legacy to support and justify its own existence rather than being its own thing, which doesn't make it more interesting or immersive, it just makes it less creative. The core problem with G5 as a whole is that it's predicated on a completely unbelievable plot point, that being ponies so easily gave up on the values of harmony and friendship that kept the three tribes unified. And now we're supposed to believe that a fundamental pillar to their civilization could be socially engineered out of them in at max a few generations through the machinations of some unicorn acting entitled in a marketplace. And instead of doing anything to learn about how magic might have caused the Great Divide to prevent it from happening again, the conflict is driven by discord acting stupidly out of character just like those ponies who suddenly fell for the racism thing again. He wants to do something that goes against his core concept just because he wants to concoct a ridiculous plan he thinks will end racism, because some filly didn't want to be with Fluttershy for not showing her how to levitate an apple. All I can say is, what a pathetic waste of my time these comics were, desperately trying to claw at how I'm a G4 fan and attempt to get my attention. It's like they were completely incapable of leaving G4 in the past and wanted to bring it back to grab the attention of bronies in spite of G4's previous popularity no longer being at its peak. I've had a lot of people asking me to check out the Make Your Mark series, and honestly I don't really care about it. If the show is gonna be anything like these comics, that being desperately trying to ride on G4's past popularity to grab the attention of bronies, and considering they bring back Twilight in the trailers, that's exactly what they're doing, I have no reason to watch it because I already know it's just gonna be another waste of my time. The thing about G4 is that it was lightning in a bottle. It's not something that you can just recreate, especially with a sequel. It was the show that kicked off people's interest in modern cartoons while having a separate identity of its own. It created a fresh world of engaging characters while using a unique framework for telling its stories. It is, in spite of its flaws, a modern classic. G5 is not a modern classic. It's a bland, tedious, flat, uninspired slog masquerading as a faithful continuation of its predecessor in spite of everything pointing to the contrary. It's not the worst continuation of a beloved classic I've ever seen. Trust me, I've seen much, much more disgusting and vindictive sequels. But this iteration of My Little Pony still sucks at capturing the spirit of friendship is magic. Instead of adding to the world and making it more interesting, it takes away from it and makes it dull. Instead of remaining consistent with the lore, it contradicts everything that was previously established. And instead of trying to stand on its own, it piggybacks on the previous entry of the franchise in a sad attempt to obtain relevance. And all I want to ask is, why? Why does this keep happening? Why does the industry insist on tainting beloved franchises with all of these half-baked reboots and remakes and sequels with no identity of their own? Are they really this creatively bankrupt that everything needs to be a nostalgic cash grab? Fuck it, I'm tired and I just want to go to bed, so here's a clip of a dog playing with its reflection.
It's a sign that he's dumb.
Thanks for checking out my review. If you liked what you saw here and would like to support me, check out my Patreon in the description. Every little bit helps and I always appreciate those who support my work. Until next time, stay cool.